All the questions that I'm going to ask here were submitted to me in advance. I kind of called through them to get a gist of what they were all about, and we had a flurry of them come in just before this call. A lot of them were essentially on the same topics, many of them. So I've sort of combined some and separated some out. So let me just jump right into it. So the most common theme revolved around the topic of election integrity. And there was one question in particular that I think captures the theme, and I've got it right here. It comes from Julianne Schmidt, who's running for an at-large national delegate spot on the Trump slate. And her question is this: how important is early voting in ballot chase programs?
All right, so that's a great question. But before I roll into that, let me just say, to Alex, thank you for helping to put this together, and to everybody who's listening or sees this, understand that we've got a great leadership team up in Minnesota. Barb Sutter has done a great job as the committee woman, and David Hahn, who's doing a great job as our chair. So really appreciate the contributions from all three of you to the RNC. And, we are right now, from the president's perspective, we're looking at putting Minnesota on the map. We have started out this election cycle really with about 7 battleground states. So places like Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. And what we're seeing in the polls right now, both internally and externally, have led us to believe that Minnesota really needs to be put in play. And so we are moving very aggressively to start making sure that Minnesota is going to be in the top tier of the states that we're looking at, because we see in that state a lot that we like. We like the mix of election issues. We like the voters and where they are. We like the polling. So Minnesota really is a tremendously important state for us. So we really appreciate that. And I think that when we talk about how we're going to win this election cycle, I'll go back to I had breakfast with President Trump right before the vote for me and for Laura Trump at the RNC to come on in as the chair and the co-chair. That we were sitting down, and he said, all right, Whatley, what's the plan? How are we going to win? And I said, well, sir, there's really 2 things we're going to do. At the RNC, we really cannot afford to be all things to all people. Typically a chair gets 2 years when they come in. They get a chance to run around the country and meet a lot of folks and have a lot of conversations and build out a lot of infrastructure. We don't have that. We are 6 months away from this election cycle. So what we need to do is 2 things. We need to get out the vote, and we need to protect the ballot. When we talk about getting out the vote, obviously there is a huge component of getting our people to vote, right? Getting registered Republicans, getting the independents, the unaffiliateds who are conservative, they're Republican without registering that way. We need to get those folks out. We need to get our low propensity voters out. But one of the things that we're really trying to do is recognize that about half of all the voters this election cycle are going to vote before Election Day. And we need to talk to those voters before they go vote. We want to make sure that every voter is an informed voter, because when you look at the combination of, Donald Trump and his policy positions over his 4 years as president, and Joe Biden and what he has done over the last 4 years, there really is no comparison, but you've got to have the conversation, right? So we view an early vote program as tremendously important. We want to make sure that we're talking to every voter before they go vote. We want to talk to our people with our messaging that says, go vote, go vote, go vote. And we want to talk to the independents, the unaffiliated voters, and say, if you're going to vote, vote Republican, and here's why. So our messaging is not necessarily going to change, but the early delivery is something new and very important for us. There's also an important ancillary benefit to this, which is that when a voter votes early, then I don't have to keep sending people to their door. I don't have to have people keep calling them. We don't have to continue to send direct mail or digital messages to them. We get to save the money. We get to take that time and effort and put it onto other undecided voters in the persuasion arena. So there's a lot to love about early voting, and that's why we're making a major push We call it the Bank the Vote initiative. And you've seen a number of statements and truths from President Trump to this effect that early voting is good, mail-in voting is good, election day voting is good. The key is we want you to make a plan and we want you to stick to the plan and get that vote in.
That's excellent, Michael. I think that really excites us here in our state. And similarly, Denise McCullough from Prior Lake asks, what is the RNC doing to fix voter integrity, not only in Minnesota but across the country?
Yeah, look, and as I said to the president, there are two things that we're going to do here to win this cycle. The first is get out the vote, and the second is we're going to protect the ballot. The election integrity program that we have built here at the RNC, and we're still building it. When I came on board as the general counsel last year to the RNC, Ronna McDaniel, the previous chair, had asked me to take on that role and specifically asked me to build our election integrity program. I think there is no more important function for the RNC than making sure that we are protecting the ballot. When we think about election integrity, what we want are two different schools of thought. The first thing is what happens before election day. What we want to do in every state is make sure that the rules of the road are set up to ensure that we're going to have a fair, accurate, secure, and transparent election. We want things like voter ID. We want things like only American citizens can vote. We want clean voter rolls. And if we're going to have a mail-in program, then we want to make sure that those mail-in votes are going to be as secure as possible. So we want to have signature requirements. We want to have witness requirements, no drop boxes, that all the things that we can do to try and protect those ballots. So in every state, we're out there right now working with legislators, working with governors, working with secretaries of state or boards of election to make sure that we have the right rules of the road in place. And if they won't work with us, then we will go to court. We've already filed 84 lawsuits in 25 states around the country to make sure that we have the right set of laws and rules and regulations governing our elections. The second key element is you have to be in the room. I'm a big believer when it comes to election integrity that I would rather have a police car parked in front of a storefront window than call them after a rock gets thrown through it. We need to have people in the room when the votes are being cast and when the votes are being counted. So we are recruiting now 100,000 volunteers all across the country to go through our election integrity training program and then be shifted to work during early voting and on election day, as well as on the canvases. We're recruiting thousands of attorneys all across the country. And I would encourage every one of you to go to our website, protectthevote.com, and make sure that you have signed up and then send that link out to everybody in your network. It is the single biggest effort that we've got going right now. We actually have more people on our election integrity team than our Get Out the Vote team right now. But those are the two biggest functions that we have at the RNC for this cycle.
That's excellent, Michael. So one of our well-known political activists here in Minnesota is Jennifer DeJarnett. She is the president of Ballot Box Strategies. I think that gives you some clue about what they do. So she writes that in 2016, Minnesota came within about 45,000 votes to a statewide win for President Trump. And in 2022, we came within 8,400 votes, or a fraction of a percent, of winning the first statewide race in 20 years. And I think that's probably some of what you have been seeing that you referred to earlier. But in both cases, we started way too late. And as a result, we chased Republican ballots into the ballot box. So when you and I met in Houston a couple of months ago, you made the point you just made about how Minnesota is now viewed as a winnable potential target state, and that's great. Well, Jennifer and I are both convinced that if we start early and with the RNC investment in placing on the ground staffers with Minnesota experience here in the state, that we'd be able to win the Chase the Ballot program up and running in time to deliver this state for President Trump. So we're pretty convinced of that. So given that, what are your thoughts on having the RNC actually have an on-the-ground staffer here in Minnesota?
Look, we're going to have resources. Like I said, this is a state that we are putting into play. We are putting on the map. We are building up our programs all across the country right now in our battleground states, and Minnesota really is that 8th battleground state. Virginia would be the 9th, and we're putting those two in play right now. So, you know, we obviously have a strong champion in Tom Emmer, who with, you know, his House leadership position is very close to the president and our team. And all the rest of the Minnesota delegation have been pushing very hard. But look, we are a data-driven operation. We are all about making sure that we are responding to the polls, we are responding to the data that we are gathering. There are a lot of states where we would love to go play, and we're not going to go play because that's not what we're seeing. What we're seeing is Minnesota is truly winnable for us, and we're going to put the resources on the ground, and it's really going to come in two ways. We're going to focus on what we need to do to get out the ballot and that get out the vote, and that's going to come down to the victory programs and the staff that you talked about. And then it's also going to focus on that election integrity program. And so we'll be working with David and the Minnesota GOP and others up there to make sure that we have those programs in place.
Again, very exciting to hear. So another one of the common themes we had here revolved around how the RNC is helping states like ours break what we have here as a Democrat stronghold. We call it the trifecta. The Democrats have the governor's mansion, they have the House, and they have the Senate. We want to change that. We're pretty excited at that prospect. So one of the people that sent me a question is Ed Gross. He is the chairman of the Minnesota Organization of Republican Veterans. That actually is an affiliate that I founded, you know, some years ago. But he wants to know your perspective on objective planning for a national partnership with state parties, and how can the RNC help us here in Minnesota?
Yeah, look, as a former state party chair, I was the chair in North Carolina for 5 years. And we had really kind of come through some hard times at the NCGOP before I took over as the chair. The 2018 election cycle was very, very tough in North Carolina for Republicans. And going into the 2020 election cycle, I knew that we had to have a very, you know, high level functioning North Carolina Republican Party. And the RNC was an absolutely fantastic partner for that. They have set up a outfit called the State Party Strategies Team. They have a program called the GROW program, which is to help state parties build up the apparatus to be able to win. You know, at the end of the day, what we want to do in all of our states, not just the battleground states, but all of our states, is we want to win with Republicans up and down the ballot. And the way we're going to do that is by listening to the voters and understanding what they need. When you think about voters, right, they vote as a family unit. They vote together. They have political discussions. What are the issues that families care about? They care about jobs in the economy. They care about education. They care about safety. They care about security. These are the issues where Republicans have an advantage across the board. They listen to the voters. They are putting solutions on the table, and that's why people are coming their way. We're seeing huge movement nationally because, frankly, the Democratic Party has left Minnesota voters and families behind. And we're seeing that in every state. And it doesn't matter if you're a rural voter, an urban voter, or a suburban voter. You care about your family and you care about the issues that drive it. Think about this election cycle, right? In Minnesota right now, people are paying 20% more for basic necessities. Think about things like groceries. Think about food. Think about gasoline. Think about housing. These are all up 20%. Our wages are not up 20%. It's putting a negative impact on every single Minnesota family. And people know that this is because Joe Biden and the Democrat leadership that they've seen in Washington has driven this inflationary cycle. The taxes are too high at the state level. Well, that's what's happening when you have Democratic control in a state like Minnesota. It's what's happened nationally when we are seeing, you know, that the taxes are too high across the board. So, you know, when Republicans sit down and have those conversations with the voters and with the families of Minnesota, they're going to get better results. And that's going to translate all the way up and down the ticket.
Okay. Well, pivoting just a little bit to something a little bit more specific to Minnesota and perhaps even a bit peculiar, is that I'm sure you know that Minnesota is one of the few states that is still a caucus state. I think there are about 6 or 7 of us. We might actually be uniquely different in that we have a caucus system, but we also have the opportunity for primary challengers thereafter. So it is my intention, and we haven't talked about this yet, you and I, Michael, but it is my intention at the RNC to put together a cohort or a coalition of caucus states, mainly just to sit down with each other and talk about what works, what doesn't work, and maybe pull away with best practices. And I don't think that's ever been done at the RNC before, but we are a caucus state. And one of the questions that came in from, let me see if I can find it here. We have a question surfaced from a few people, actually. Natalie Barnes, who I think is on the call right now, and Ed, and I'm not sure how to say his last name, Sislo, I think, both from our second congressional district, where there are primary challengers to endorse candidates. So what are your thoughts about the RNC's role in situations like that?
Well, we don't play in primaries. I think, that as a general rule at the RNC, when we're talking about the federal races, we will only play in a primary when we have, it's called a Rule 11 waiver, where the committee man, the committee woman, and the chair all send a letter to us saying, hey, we would like to have the RNC engage in this type of a primary. We did not engage in the primary for the presidency. Once President Biden became our presumptive nominee, and what that means is that he's got enough delegates already in his column to be nominated at the convention, that's when we start to move in terms of our working relationship with them. But look, I'm a primary guy from North Carolina. I think primaries are good. I think that we want to have, a contest, that we want to have a discussion. As they say, iron sharpens iron. And I think that we generally see better candidates that come out of a caucus or better out of a convention, just because we've already had a chance to figure out what are the issues that they're going to have to address and who can actually address those things. I think having a conversation at the RNC with the other caucus states makes all the sense in the world. And, just as we're kind of moving forward with it. But, from the RNC's perspective, we try very hard to be neutral through all things in the primary and make sure that when somebody comes out of it, whether it's a caucus or a primary, that we're going to adopt that candidate and we're going to do everything we can to get them across the line.
Okay. Thanks for addressing that question, because that is particularly tough in our state right now in a couple of areas. Well, we both know that the RNC has changed dramatically over the course of the past couple of months, if not, a few years. So can you talk to us a little bit about the dramatic change at the RNC, particularly with regard to aligning with the Trump campaign?
Yeah, look, I think the biggest thing, and I just touched on this before, is that, in March, Donald Trump became our presumptive nominee, and it made all the difference in the world in terms of our operations. The RNC was formed 170 years ago to actually support Republican presidential candidates. That's our job. That's our mission. So when we have a nominee, we are in a position to be able to help them. So what we have done sometimes in the past is you will have the presidential campaign and all of their apparatus. They'll have a political shop, a communications shop, digital data, election integrity. And then you'll have the RNC, which will have a political shop, a communications shop, a digital shop, a data shop. We wanted to actually merge those operations and put the campaign and the RNC so that we're working with one set of operations, right? So we have merged the two. So we have one political shop, one communications shop, one digital, one data, one election integrity shop. There's a couple things that we gain from that. One, we have one operation. We have one message. We are unified in everything that we're doing going out into talking to the voters. The second thing is that we have a lot of economies of scale. I don't have to pay for two different operations. When you think about a presidential campaign, the candidate gets a much better rate on TV. The party gets a much better rate for mail. And then there are all of the other operations that it doesn't make any difference who pays for it. Well, when the candidate gets a much better rate on TV, we want to take every other expense off of their books so that they can take every dollar that they raise and they can put it on TV. So when we merge our operations the way that we have, that allows us to take on all of those other staffing functions and keep the campaign with the ability to do its own polling, its own internal messaging, and its advertising, but then everything else is unified. The last time that we have really merged our operations like this was George W. Bush in 2000 and 2004, where it was done very, very effectively. So we have brought Chris LaCivita over from the campaign manager slot. He is still co-campaign manager, but now he's also the chief of staff here at the RNC. And then the political director, James Blair, is now the political director for both. The communications shop is headed up jointly as well. So we have a much narrower scope of function. We're not trying to be all things to all people. We are making sure that we have one unified set of operations going forward. The other big thing that we have seen is that we have merged our fundraising operations. We have what's called the Trump 47 Committee. That committee is basically the Trump fundraising operation plus the RNC fundraising operation. And that way we can raise significantly more money and we can put it in terms of lead on target. And we have seen the fundraising skyrocket since March. In fact, we raised over $100 million in the first month with President Trump as our nominee. We just raised $75 million in April. And so the fundraising is really taking off. One of the neat things about the fundraising that we've seen, 95% plus of all of those donors are small dollar donors that are coming in online. In fact, while the president is in trial up in New York, we've been raising over $1 million online every single day from small donors. So that we are seeing more money come in, and we are being smarter about how we're spending it.
That leads me right into another question is, since there is an alignment between the RNC and the Trump campaign, can you tell us a little bit about the judicial lawfare that's being waged against the president, and how is that affecting our strategies and our tactics and fundraising?
Yeah. Well, what I will say is this is something that we have never seen in the United States before. It is unbelievable, the degree of coordination that we are seeing coming out of the White House with Democratic prosecutors all across the country that are using the courts both civilly and criminally to go after the president and his allies. It is truly banana republic kind of stuff. In particular, with what we're seeing in New York right now, where the president has to be in court 4 days a week, you know, what that means is that we have 2 days a week to have him on the road. So we get Wednesdays and we get Saturdays as we're moving him around. We have had to change how we are campaigning. No question about it. Doesn't take him off the road. It just changes the way that we're doing it. You know, anytime that you have a candidate who can walk out of court, walk around the corner to a bodega in New York City and use that appearance to command 48 hours of earned media, or he could go to a construction site at 6:30 in the morning while Joe Biden is still in bed, and you get 2 solid days worth of earned media coming out of that hit. You know, that is something that Joe Biden will never be able to do, is directly go out and communicate with the American voters the way that President Trump can. You know, we were down in Atlanta a few weeks ago. On our way to an event, we pulled over and went into a Chick-fil-A. The city that we were in, the part of the city was Vine City, 94% Black, 94% registered Democrat, 97% voted for Joe Biden in 2020. And the president was absolutely mobbed. They were hugging him, they were kissing him, they were taking pictures with him, they were getting him to sign things. There was a line out the door, and it just goes to show this guy right now is reaching out to Americans, every class, every city, every area, unlike Joe Biden. And so, you know, it has changed our tactics, but he is certainly going to be the most effective communicator of any presidential candidate in our lifetime.
Well, I do have to laugh at the word picture of the energy difference between President Trump and President Biden, where Biden's still in bed when President Trump's been in hours at it. So, and I know this thing you just mentioned was not on a Sunday. I know that because Chick-fil-A is, of course, not open on Sundays in honor of the Day of Faith. So I received a couple of similar questions from Denise McCullough at Prior Lake and Eric Barkowski both from our second congressional district. And what is the RNC doing to maintain our base of support, including our grassroots candidates, and yet craft its messaging to attract independent voters and disillusioned Democrats, helping us put blue districts back in play?
Yeah, right now what we're seeing is a mass exodus from the Democratic Party. We are seeing rural Democrats that are coming to Republicans all across the country, but we're also seeing blacks, we're seeing Hispanics, we're seeing Asian Americans, we're seeing Jewish voters that are leaving the Democratic Party in droves. And what we want to do is make them not vote Democrat, not just go home. We want to bring them over to the Republican Party. So we've got a lot of effort that we're making right now to get inroads into those communities. It's absolutely important for us. We have an office here at the RNC called Strategic Initiatives, which is basically our coalition's effort. And so we've got our offices, our community outreach offices that are focused around the country on reaching out to those communities. But really, truly, the biggest thing that we can do is understand what is motivating all of those voters. It is things like immigration and inflation. Inflation is really not just a number. It's not just a statistic. It is the impact that these higher prices on electricity and gasoline, on food and on housing are having on our families. And that cuts across every spectrum. I was having a conversation with a Black faith leader from the Deep South the other day, and he said, man, we just want to be treated like adults. We just want to have a conversation. We want you to understand where we're coming from. That is the outreach plan, is have those conversations with every community. And the fact that these communities are not traditionally Republican doesn't matter. We want to go have those conversations because, honestly, when we think about, North State, Minnesota, always reliably blue, always reliably conservative and focused, blue collar workers, those folks are coming over to the Republican Party. There's the same thing with rural North Carolina, where I'm from. There is no such thing as a rural Democrat in North Carolina anymore. They have all come across the transom. And so we're in a position, I think, with President Trump to truly make the Republican Party the party for the working class. And that is something that is really long in coming and was very, very necessary. We don't want to necessarily just be the country club Republicans. We are the blue collar Republican Party.
Well, Michael, I appreciate you coming on, and I want to be sensitive to your time. I know you've got a very tight schedule and people here have to probably go back to work. But I'm very thankful that you took that time out of your schedule, and I look forward to seeing you here in a couple of months.
Excellent. Thank you so much to you, Alex, and to the entire Minnesota GOP. We look forward to spending a lot of time up there, and we're going to win Minnesota. We're going to turn it red. Thanks, guys.
All right. Take care. Good day.